Parshat is Achrei Mot-Kedoshim. It says in Achrei Mos, it says, "K'maytze Eretz Mitzrayim." Hashem says to Moshe, tell the people that K'maytze Eretz Mitzrayim, the actions of the land of Mitzrayim that you lived, you should not act like them. K'maytze Eretz Canaan, and the actions of the land of Canaan that I'm bringing to you also should not act like them. You should not follow them. So Rashi says, Magid, it teaches us that the actions, the life, the conduct of the Egyptians and the Canaanim were more corrupt than all the nations of the world. And therefore, and that's what Hashem is saying. I don't want you to emulate their ways. I don't want you to follow in their ways. So if David Feinstein points out, Ben Hashem will be davening in the yeshiva this morning. Rabbi Feinstein. David Feinstein points out that the pasuk doesn't say Kamasei Mitzrayim, like the actions of the people of Egypt. It says Kamasei Eretz Mitzrayim, actions of the land of Egypt. Kamasei Eretz Canaan, like the actions of the land of Canaan. So he wants to suggest that the Torah is hinting to that it was the land of Egypt that we know was a very prosperous land. It had the Nile and so on and so forth, an amazing land, physical. And we know Canaan, the land of Canaan. Look at the fruits. We're going to have soon with the Jews sending in the Shlach, and the amazing fruits and the amazing, unbelievable blessing of the land of Israel. How many people you need to have to carry some fruit? You need a few people. You need a number of people to carry some fruit, and so on and so forth. So the material wealth of the land was used in a negative way, and the people took all that material blessings. Like we have a lot of people that have a lot of material blessings that are on drugs. They have money, they can buy drugs. People don't have money. They don't have access to a lot of drugs. So a lot of people they steal in order to get the drugs. But we know a lot of you, if you go ahead and you'll take a survey of children that come from homes that are poor homes or not so wealthy homes. But in wealthy homes, what's the level of drugs in those two homes, those two places? I think there's a lot more drugs going. If you take the middle class, and then you talk about the people who are the upper class, they got the money and they're using it in a negative way. So therefore, Pasuk is emphasizing Kamasei Eretz Mitzrayim, indicating the idea that the land of Mitzrayim, that sometimes the blessing that was given was used in a very negative way. And even in different countries in this world, in the Western countries also, there's great blessings that God has given. But the question is, what do you do with the blessings? Do you use the blessings and use the blessing in the right way or not? And that, ruined the people. The people corrupted themselves with the great blessing that they were given. They corrupted themselves and they didn't use it properly. It's interesting to note that Rabbi Yosef and Yechav Das has a whole discussion, Chelek Dalet, I think it is, I'm not sure, I remember which Chelek was, a whole discussion of how did the Rambam and other Jewish communities, great people, live in Egypt. The Torah says you're not allowed to go, you're not allowed to go back to Egypt. You're not allowed to, and the Rambam himself says you're not allowed to live in Egypt. If you're not allowed to live in Egypt, how did the Rambam live in Egypt? Not only the Rambam, great Gedolim, great people. So the Ritva also asks the question, and the Ritva says, he brings a couple of answers. One answer the Ritva says is, some say that the prohibition is to live in the land of Egypt, but that land of Egypt was the country that was destroyed. Those cities were destroyed and then rebuilt. So therefore, there's no prohibition. Some want to say there's no prohibition of living in Egypt. It's like a new Egypt. It's not the Egypt before. So maybe we could suggest that's and also the Rambam says. I'm saying the Rambam also says in the Sefer Mitzvahs, why does Hashem say I don't want you to go back to Egypt? So I think the Rambam says because of Maseh Eretz Mitzrayim, because there's a corruptness in the land, and therefore Hashem said I don't want you to go back. So maybe we could say a couple of things. Number one, we could say the land. Therefore, if the land is not the same land anymore, the pasuk is emphasizing Kamasei Eretz Mitzrayim, the land of Egypt. I don't want you. And therefore, if the land is now a different land, it's not the same land. It was destroyed and rebuilt. Maybe there's no prohibition. But the Rambam still says there's a prohibition today. But there's another answer that's given. It's a Sancheiriv he moved everybody from all different places. He moved all the people throughout the world, and they're not in their original home anymore. So therefore, it's not the same. It's not the same people. It's a different people. And the Torah is the prohibition is only if those people who acted in such a terrible way, those are the people I don't want you to go back to that land. But if the people are different, it's not the same people. That's how some Rishonim answer the question. But again, it doesn't answer for the Rambam because the Rambam himself said he can't live in Mitzrayim. So the Ritva says the reason why the Rambam lived in Mitzrayim was because they were not living in Egypt with the mindset, this is my place to stay. There are a lot of people, they say, you know what, I'm going to be making Aliyah. But I'm going to be in medical school first, I'm going to be doing an internship, and then after I'm going to go to Israel. So, but I'm not here to stay. So the idea was the Jewish community's mindsets when they went to Egypt, when they lived in Egypt, was this is not going to be our home of residence. It's not going to be our permanent place. And therefore, that's how some Ritva wants to say. And Ritva says, I myself, I went to Egypt, I opened the yeshiva, I taught her, and then I left. And if the mindset is that when you go to Egypt, you're not here to stay, to live, and in a permanent fashion, so that's how the Ritva wants to say how the Rambam and all those communities were able to go to live in Egypt.
Well,
yes.
Does the Rambam also mention mitzvot that go to high nowadays?
But again, that would apply. It applies today. If a person would go to Egypt,
he says it applies today.
Yes. If you would live in Egypt today with the mindset, according to the Ritva, that I want to remain here permanently, I want to stay here, I'm like maybe permanent house of residence, that will be a problem. Okay, now in the Dorish Moshe, Moshe Feinstein, in Parshat Kedoshim, the first it opens, the Parshat begins as Kedoshim Tiyu Ki Kodesh Ani Hashem Elokechem. Hashem asks of us to be Kodosh, to be holy, because I am holy. So Moshe says, in life, if you as a parent, I don't know if he says all these examples, but I'll stretch it. As a parent, have a good Shabbos. Thank you. As a parent, or as a rabbi, or as anybody, a person, as a friend, if you want to encourage somebody to go ahead and do something, and you want to ask something of someone, some expectations you have of somebody, you want them to act a certain way, you want your students to grow into something, you want your children to grow into something, you want your friends to grow into something, you want your friends to be greater than they are, you want them to be, you're not satisfied that you reach great levels yourself. First, if you want to ask of somebody else something, you have to first make sure that you perfect yourself in what you're asking from them. So he says, Kedoshim Tiyu, Hashem says, I want you to act in a way of Kedusha, a way of holiness, which you could say holiness represents the Fnim Mishur Sadin, going above and beyond. Ki Kadosh Ani Hashem. I am Kadosh. I Hashem act with Midas Harachamim, I Midas HaChesed. I don't throw the book at the person. I'm not exact with the person. I remove myself from the Midas Hadin. I want you also to act in life with Kedusha. I'm Kadosh. If I'm Kadosh, I can ask of you to be Kadosh. And he says, when Moshe points out, when it comes to physical things, you go to a doctor. And if you ever had a doctor, some doctors are overweight. Okay, there are some concept. Some are overweight. Then the overweight doctor says, and some doctors are very overweight. Some internists are very overweight. Then they tell you, I want you to lose weight. So it's not healthy for you. So when Moshe says, you should know that it still makes a very big impression on a person when it comes to physical things. Because the person said, listen, if you're overweight and you're very heavy, it's very dangerous, and chas v'sholom, you'll get diabetes or whatever the sickness might be. So even if the doctor himself is overweight, but you understand it, you're able to take it, you're able to listen to it, you're still able to listen to it a certain amount. But when it comes to ruchnius, when it comes to the religious sphere of things, there he says it makes very little impression when someone tells you something to do and they themselves are not living up to it. So therefore that's what Hashem is saying. Kedoshim Tiyu, I'm only asking of you something, because that's what I've asked. That's what I am, and I can expect that of you. Now the Parsha also says, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. The pasuk talks about this famous mitzvah of love your fellow neighbor like yourself. Now many people, everybody knows that pasuk, but I don't know that everyone remembers what was the context of that pasuk. It wasn't a pasuk written by itself, it was part of a bigger pasuk. What were the other mitzvahs that were mentioned in that pasuk? I know that everyone remembers it, and I think Losikam Velosita. Torah says, I don't want you to take revenge. I don't want you to hold a grudge. And it concludes V'ahavta Re'echa Kamocha. So I want to say the point is like this. This is one of the hardest mitzvahs that the Torah asks of a person. The Torah asks of a person, I don't want you to hold a grudge. That means to say, you ask somebody for something, and you really feel that he was able to help you and give it to you what you needed, and he didn't. He didn't come through. And now they ask you for something back. The Torah says, you can't go ahead and hold revenge, and you can't guard it, you can't remember it. Torah says lo sitar. What does lo sitar mean? Don't guard it. It's not enough that you don't go and do an action against the guy. It's not enough you don't, the guy asked you to borrow you asked the guy to borrow his car, he didn't lend you his car, and then when he asked you if I could borrow your car, so you didn't take revenge, you let him use your car. But you still remembered that, he didn't let me use his car. I'll never forget that. I'm going to be nice about it, I'm going to give it to you, but I'm not like you, I'm going to give you my car. But the Torah says, I don't even want you to feel that. I don't want you to have that, to remember that. You have to totally erase that from your heart. That is a tremendous level that the Torah expects us of us. And that Torah says, how do you reach that level? Maybe that's the pshat. Because love your fellow neighbor like yourself. Let me ask you a question. If let's say you acted in a certain way to somebody, how would you want to be treated? Would you want to be given another chance? Or would you want your friend to keep on remembering what you did to him? So the Torah is telling you, treat your fellow neighbor like yourself.
I would just go one step further. I would say it's not just like you would like him to not hold a grudge against you, you should not hold a grudge against him. I think if you love him like yourself, then what do you do when you hold a grudge or take revenge? You're essentially hurting yourself. You're hurting him. If you love him like yourself, that's hurting yourself. So
okay, but I'm focusing on the Torah says don't take revenge. Why should you take? Look, how would you want to be treated? You don't want someone to take revenge against you. You don't want someone to remember what you did wrong if you did something wrong. So that's how you have to act for the other person. Lo sitar. Forget. And the chinuch says the idea of lo sitar, the idea of not holding a grudge, is the idea of shalom. Because Hashem wants that there should be peace among the Jewish people. So therefore, if you're going to remember what the guy did wrong, you ever hear the joke about husbands and wives? If they get into a disagreement, so not only are they argue, they're going to disagree on this concept, but they're going to start. You remember that? And you remember that? You remember last week and 2 weeks ago? And what about 6 months ago? If any of those spouses do that, that means they transgressed, they violated all those times. Lo sita. They were guarding it in their heart. And they're waiting until, but the way the Torah says, no. If you have a disagreement with your wife, no such thing as a fight in a marriage. Remember that. Only you can have a disagreement, but not a fight. But if you have a disagreement in a marriage, and if you go ahead and you say, and you remember everything else, so therefore you violated the prohibition. The Torah wants you that your disagreement should only be about this situation at hand. There's nothing else on the table. Everything else is the past, and it's forgotten about. That's what the Torah is expecting of us. And therefore, if people will live to follow the Torah, therefore they would have beautiful shalom bayis in the house, because they won't have because they don't have all this build up and they don't have all this baggage, as we say, that they're remembering in their mind. Their mind is playing with them. And that's what the Torah says. That's how Lasikom Lositam. And also the concept that some Rishonim point out, maybe the Sefer Chinuch, I think others, that the idea is a person should realize, if somebody did something bad to me, obviously I was deserving of it, or if I wasn't deserving, Hashem would not have let them do it to me. Of course, they are. It says if a person they're a bad shliach, why did they have to be the messenger? They have to ask themselves if they did something wrong. They're going to be taken to task for it. But the person who received the negativity from somebody, I'm supposed to say, obviously it was meant to be that I should be deserving of it. So with that, Rabbi David Feinstein says, the Gemara says in Brachas and Samach and Aleph, a person should accustom himself to say, Kol ma da'avad rachmana, whatever Hashem does to me is the tava of it, for the best. So he says, if a person he says if a person is able to see the sweetness that is hidden in the difficult circumstances, then he will not take a grudge. And therefore he says, lo sikom, the letters of sikom, of taking revenge, also is the same letters of masok, of sweetness. Mem, saf, kuf. If a person sees the mesikos, if a person sees the sweetness in the better side of it, the bright side, and that there's a reason why something happened to him. Lo sikom, don't take revenge. Recognize the sweetness of whatever happened to the person. Recognize it was for the best, and therefore you won't take revenge. Similar to the word nega, a plague, also has the same letters of oneg, pleasure. Why? Because a person has to remember that a nega, when Hashem gives a person a nega, a leprosy or something, it's for his best interest, and because if he'll shape up and they won't continue making a mistake. Yes.
I just don't if someone intentionally hurts you, goes after, it's really, actually, I don't know.
I mean, it doesn't mean you have to.
You're not going to take revenge, but you can. I don't necessarily think that it's it's the best thing that ever happened to this person.
I think a person has to ask himself, why did he merit, or she merited that it happened to him? But obviously, there's something.
There's always a good outcome to certain things,
right.
But it's not necessarily I don't think it's a punishment or any. I don't think you should always say that. Oh, this is a punishment for such and such thing, or this person did this to me because I did this such and such. I don't.
But I'm saying, but there is a concept that a person has to. If a person received, was on the receiving end of an activity, they have to ask themselves. Most probably, there's something that they have to. It's not justifying the person who's doing the offense. Yeah. They're wrong. Anybody who does, they're wrong. Paro was wrong. There's no question about it. But just like the Jewish people, and historically, when the Jewish people we have a difficulty happening to Jewish people, it's because we're doing something wrong. So therefore, there's a difficulty happening to the Jewish people. If a person, the Gemara says, if a person sees that he's having difficulties, he should analyze their ways. Why am I having the difficulties? And the Gemara says at the end, if a guy says, I looked, I didn't find, so the Gemara says, most probably there's some bittul Torah. Take care. Most probably he could say there's he hasn't been learning as much as there's always some time for that. It doesn't mean that a person should knock themselves out and go get depressed about it. You know what I'm saying? But they have to figure out, be proactive to try to figure out. If they can't figure out themselves, they can always ask someone else. Maybe they go to a Rabbi, a teacher, for some guidance to say, I can't figure out what I'm why am I having this problem? So maybe they could talk it over with a Rabbi or a teacher. Maybe they could try to, give some insight into the matter. I saw a very interesting Arachayim in Perek Yutes, Pasuk Chavtes. Perek Yutes, Pasuk Chavtes. It says, first of all, maybe we'll give a little to the Cheskuni. It was earlier. It says, Al techalu es bitcho laznosa. Don't profane your daughter to. So Rashi to laznosa, to create for vaznus. So Rashi says this is referring to if a person goes ahead and he would give over his daughter, not for the purpose of marriage, just for the purpose of other purposes, just relations and so on and so forth. It's prohibited. And the Cheskuni says, this is the quotes the Gemara Sanhedrin, Zeh hamasha bita habageres ve'ena Masiya. His daughter gets older, he doesn't want to marry off. The father says, I'm not in a rush. I'm not in a rush. She doesn't have to rush so fast to get married. I'd rather her remain single for a long time. That's called techalos bito laznosa. You're creating a situation that your daughter is of age. She wants to get married, and you're not letting her get married. You're holding her back. So by holding her back from getting married, will create an atmosphere that she should go ahead and do znos. And the Chaim says, a person has a daughter, and he wants her to get married. Right? Let's take it the other way around. He wants the other extreme. He wants her to get married. So the Torah is telling us, in order for a person has to be very careful. Al techalas bita, don't profane your daughter laznosa. Don't go ahead and so to speak, act with your daughter and show her off to everybody, and I will just add my own, dress, encourage her to dress to kill, as the expression goes, right? Because what do you want? You want everyone to see her, and you want people to like her. You want to show her beauty off, and therefore people are going to marry her, and so on and so forth. But that's what you want to do. But that's not appropriate. And that's what the Achrei is bito laznosa. Don't desecrate your daughter laznosa. And maybe I would suggest, you could say, because if you go ahead, even if your purpose, the Achrei is saying, even though your purpose is in order for her to get married, but Hashem says it's a chil, it's still not appropriate for her. But I would like to say that even though your intention is appropriate, but a lot of times the result won't be appropriate. Because if you go ahead and you dress, and she's dressed up in this fashion, which is inappropriate, which is not a modest fashion, so that will of course lead to znos. Another thing, and we'll end with the following, maybe from Rabbi Friedman. Rabbi Friedman said a beautiful idea. The pasuk says, the pasuk talks about lo selach rachel ba'amecha. We have people. There's a problem. Not that anyone here has a problem, but there's a problem of people talking negativity about people, right? Lo selach rachel v'chilas, and you see something what somebody does, and then you go ahead and you tell what somebody said about you. You know what someone did to you. And you go over, you report it to the other guy. That's v'chilas. Call it tattletaling. Okay, and the pasuk right before that. The pasuk connects b'seder tishbara misecha. The previous pasuk says, "Give your friend the benefit of the doubt," and then the pasuk says, "Lo selach rachel ba'amecha." Don't be a talebearer telling rechilas. So he says, the Torah is teaching us: if you want to make sure that you're not a person of rechilas, you're not a person of peddler who's going ahead and telling negativity what people are saying about somebody else, the first thing is b'seder tishbara misecha. If you give people the benefit of the doubt, when you see that somebody does something, and how do you judge it? You give the benefit of the doubt. Therefore, you're not going to be you're not going to have what to peddle. You're not going to have any merchandise of negativity to peddle to the other guy, because what the other guy did, you gave the benefit of the doubt. So what are you going to tell? You're going to say he did this to you. He didn't do anything bad. But if you have the proper vision, outlook in life, ayin tova, if you look at everything what people do in the proper light, then that will help lead to that you won't have anything negative to carry. But what happens is many times in life, people do things, and they don't. It's the speculation and how we interpret the things that takes us to the next level. Many things are misread in our interpretation of things, and that's because not enough people are b'seder tishbara misecha. I once went to Rabbi Pam, Zitzal, in the Yeshiva of Torah Das. I was discussing a certain thing. I wasn't talking negative about anybody, but he used the word, to me, that's speculation. Whatever this thing I was discussing with him, and it made a very big impression. It's going back a number of years. Well, the idea was what I perceived as a fact, as reality. He said, that's speculation. That's my interpretation. That's how I'm reading it. But maybe it's not that way. So I think in life, a lot of times people are speculating, and they don't think they're speculating, that they're saying it as a fact. It's not exactly that case. So therefore, we have to work. I think it's not just it's an obligation in our Torah. Giving the benefit of the doubt is not just a nice idea; it's an obligation. And the Sefer Chinuch says the reason for it. He says that there should be peace among the people. If you give people the benefit of the doubt, someone does something to you, you always look at the benefit of the doubt. Therefore, there'll be peace to be shalom. And that's what Hashem wants, as we see. It's full of peace. And the more a person learns the Torah, more a person fulfills the words of the Torah, will go ahead and there'll be more peace in his or her life. I wish everyone a beautiful Shabbos.